SLT Mobitel Fiber, the fiber of the nation. SLT Mobitel Fiber, the fiber of the nation.
Surf Excel නම් භාගයයි මාසයකට වඩා රිදි සෝතයි. Tonight, ready for anything. The central bank governor talks about his plans to handle inflation, depreciation and readiness to take hard decisions.
I'm not a person who would like to inflict shock treatments too much. But at the same time, if there is a situation which is really necessitating a shock, we would be not unhappy to do that. But at the same time, I believe most new interventions need to be guided carefully and should be gradual in nature.
No need to panic. The Defence Secretary calls for calm after a fake email attack threat is sent to the Bandaranaike International Airport. Caught in time. Reports of contaminated organic fertilizer gets a response from the Agriculture Department.
Any organic fertilizer which is going to come to Sri Lanka, first we will be checking a sample from the supplier. If it has any harmful pathogen, will not come to Sri Lanka.
Slight respite. Health authorities extend the quarantine curfew until the 1st of next month, but permit some liberties today. All this and much more coming up on this Friday, the 17th of September 2021.
දසනකාන්තී චූර්ණය සහිත ලීවර් ආයිෂ් දන්තාලේපය දත්වල ඇති ප්‍රශ්න 10ක් වලකයි.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Shanella Fernando. In your top stories for tonight, Central Bank Governor Ajit Nivard Cabral says that although he is traditionally averse to what he termed shock treatment for the country's economy, the central bank and government are prepared to take any measures necessary if the need arises. Speaking to Indivarya Muatta on our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24 yesterday, he expressed confidence that depreciation, inflation and the country's forex reserves can be stabilized through ensuring that the right fundamentals are maintained. You can catch the repeat telecast of the governor's exclusive interview next Monday at 1 p.m. on AdaDerana 24.
In his first interview as central bank governor, Ajit Nivard Cabral stated that controlling the depreciation of the rupee does not lie in implementing strict controls, but in providing the proper guidance and making sure the right fundamentals are in place to maintain stability.
When the government took over at 181 against the US dollar, the rupee has been a massive question in Sri Lanka. What kind of policy will you have in managing this situation?
By the year 2019, just 5 years later, the rupee had depreciated to 181. That is a 50 rupee depreciation in just 5 years. To my mind, far too much. Now also the rupee has depreciated because of the drying up of tourism receipts, which has put a lot of pressure into the entire economy. Even with those tensions, I think the rupee has still depreciated too much. So that's why I think it's necessary for us to have some mechanisms put in place, with the central bank also making certain interventions, the government making certain interventions to ensure that the rupee value is also retained at certain reasonable levels, so that we don't have another set of new vulnerabilities being created in the economy.
Does this mean you will revert to managing the rupee at a stable or particular range going forward? Is the central bank expected to intervene?
It would mean that the central bank also needs to give guidance. And when you're giving guidance, sometimes you have to not only give moral suasion, you got to also provide with the funds for that. So you need to find funds for that. You need to also ensure that sometimes certain activities are promoted and certain activities are not encouraged too much. So it's a balance. So that balance sometimes in times of turmoil will need to be implemented carefully, and it needs to be implemented in consultation with the stakeholders.
Further, with the government's special tax amnesty on undisclosed income having faced much opposition, including allegations that the measure would throw the door wide open to large-scale money laundering, the central bank governor says that there has been a general misconception regarding what undisclosed funds really mean.
What is the government policy here in welcoming undisclosed monies into the country?
We are providing the space for people who have not disclosed their incomes in the past to come clean, pay a tax which is 1%, and then bring those funds into the formal economy. And that's also vital that we do that. That doesn't mean that this money is black and that this money is illegal. It could be that somebody has sold a property and there was some money that they forgot to disclose, or that they had some income that they had not reflected in their tax returns. So we are giving them the opportunity to come clean and do that. But I think the money laundering laws are not going to be compromised as a result of this new law that has been brought in.
Meanwhile, Governor Cabral also stated that although there are challenges to maintaining a stable inflation rate, the central bank is confident that its planned measures would be able to pull it back to the mid-single-digit range, as seen during his previous term at the helm of the central bank.
What will be your policy in terms of inflation, managing inflation in the country and printing of money? We spoke about the central bank printing a lot of money this past few months, but what will your policy be?
I would have a rational policy, because I think we need to have a clear aim as to what we are hoping to deliver. I know many countries have resorted to printing money. It should necessarily be a temporary measure, because we do know that keeping a large amount of money outstanding for too long a time can put pressure on an economy. But if it is managed in a shorter period of time, it can always be pulled back, and that's something that we need to be addressing. And at the same time, there is a danger of inflation that can go up unless we take the right steps. So far, I think the steps taken have been good enough to ensure that inflation is within reasonable limits. But going into the future, we got to keep an eye on it all the time. When I came into the central bank, the longest period that we have had with a single-digit inflation was only 23 months. But thereafter, since 2009, Sri Lanka has had a single-digit inflation, which is actually in the mid-single digits. We know exactly what needs to be done. I think we are on top of that challenge, and we should be able to deliver mid-single-digit inflation for the future as well.
In closing, Governor Cabral added that despite his firm belief that the economy will not require shock treatment, the central bank will, however, still keep it as an option if absolutely necessary.
I'm not a person who would like to inflict shock treatments too much. But at the same time, if there is a situation which is really necessitating a shock, we would be not unhappy to do that. But at the same time, I believe most new interventions need to be guided carefully and should be gradual in nature. Then the economy has time to adjust.
Defence Secretary retired General Kamal Gunaratne has called on the public to avoid panic over what he termed a fake email received by the officials at the Bandaranaike International Airport that warned of an attack on the facility. Releasing a statement today, the Defence Secretary added that law enforcement authorities are in full control of the situation and are geared to ensure that no disruptions to the country's peace are allowed to happen.
The country's security establishment was sent into emergency mode yesterday after an attack warning was received by officials of the country's main airport, the Bandaranaike International Airport. According to sources, an email purportedly sent by the would-be attackers had warned that the airport would be the target of an attack unless 5 suspects allegedly named in the email were released. This prompted a rush to shore up security at the airport, with the defence establishment having deployed additional security forces personnel in readiness. However, releasing an official statement, Defence Secretary retired General Kamal Gunaratne allayed public fears today, labelling the email as a fake email and calling for calm. The Defence Secretary also assured the public that the security forces and police were in full control of the situation and that the security measures put in place in response were enough to prevent any such attempts. He added that law enforcement institutions are currently carrying out their duties and would not leave room for any breach of the country's peace.
Following the release of a national plant quarantine service report showing the detection of harmful bacteria in samples of organic fertilizer said to be imported into the country, there was some uproar on social media, with some alleging that the stocks were already in the country. However, the Director General of the Department of Agriculture, Dr. Ajantha De Silva, clarified the issue today, saying that these samples were of stocks not yet imported that will not be permitted entry into the country. Following the release of a national plant quarantine service report showing the detection of harmful bacteria in samples of organic fertilizer said to be imported into the country, there was some uproar on social media, with some alleging that the stocks were already in the country. However, the Director General of the Department of Agriculture, Dr. Ajantha De Silva, clarified the issue today, saying that these samples were of stocks not yet imported that will not be permitted entry into the country. A recent report by the National Plant Quarantine Service of the Agriculture Department revealed that a sample of a solid organic fertilizer which was said to be imported into the country has been found to be highly contaminated with harmful bacteria. After being subjected to a sterility test, the results showed that the samples were contaminated with BACILLUS spp and ERWINIA spp, which are highly pathogenic to plants. First at 9 inquired into the matter from Director General of the Department of Agriculture, Dr. Ajantha De Silva, who insisted that the fertilizer stocks are still under testing, adding that stocks contaminated with harmful substances or bacteria will not be permitted to enter the country.
What we usually do is, any organic fertilizer which is going to come to Sri Lanka, based on the guidelines given for importation of fertilizer, they have to follow different laboratory tests. If it is plant origin, it has to go to the National Plant Quarantine Center. That's the microorganism test. First, we will be checking a sample from the supplier. It means that the quantity of fertilizer will be in the country of origin. It will not come to Sri Lanka. We will do the testing, and if it complies with our requirement, then we will issue a commercial permit. Then the fertilizer will come to Sri Lanka. Even that, once it is come to Sri Lanka, before unloading the fertilizer, all these procedures will be adapted and see whether it has any harmful pathogens. So based on that one only, whatever the fertilizer comes to Sri Lanka will be allowed to get into Sri Lankan soil.
Meanwhile, we also put the matter to environmentalist Sujiva Kumari in order to get a clearer picture regarding the dangers that such contaminated organic fertilizer poses to the environment.
If we import in any condition, those organic fertilizer may include some heavy metals and toxic bacteria as well. It causes harm to our soil. Some alien bacteria will come to our environment like other alien species such as alien plants. That may be a threat to our ecosystems linked directly with soil. Therefore, if we import organic fertilizer, we have to consider thoroughly and we have to do studies very smoothly.
Further, she also stated that the local production of organic fertilizer is the only tried and tested method of preventing alien bacteria from coming into the country.
Here, the important thing is to understand soil organic fertilizer will make our soil and plants healthy and strong. Not only that, as they are slow release fertilizers, there is no possibility of over-fertilizing any plant. Further, organic fertilizers are renewable, biodegradable, sustainable and environmentally friendly. The best solution is to have our way to make solid organic fertilizer in our country.
More news on the other side of this break. Stay tuned.
Big 3.
Welcome back in more news. Authorities announced the extension of the quarantine curfew that was due to be lifted next Monday until the 1st of October. The decision was taken at a meeting of the Special Committee on COVID-19 Control today, following calls by experts to do so and to cement the current gains in the last 4 weeks.
Sri Lanka has been under quarantine curfew for close to 4 weeks since it first came into effect on the 20th of August. Since then, the country's daily COVID cases have declined, showing the effectiveness of such a move. However, with the curfew set to be lifted on Monday, calls were made by experts yesterday to extend the lockdown until early October in order to cement the success gained so far. As such, authorities announced today that the quarantine curfew will be extended until the 1st of October. The decision was taken when the Special Committee on COVID-19 Control met under the patronage of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa this morning.
දැනට පවතින නිරෝධායන ඇඳිරි නීතිය එළඹෙන ඔක්තෝබර් 1 වන සිකුරාදා උදෑසන 4 දක්වා තවදුරටත් පවත්වාගෙන යාමට අතිගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා විසින් අද පැවති කොයිත්කාරී සදක බලකාර රැස්වීමේදී උපදෙස් ලබා දෙනු ලැබුවා. මෙහිදී විශේෂයෙන්ම මෝටර රථ ප්‍රවාහන දෙපාර්තමේන්තුව සහ ඉඩම් රෙජිස්ට්‍රාර් ජෙනරාල් කාර්යාලවල සුළු වශයෙන් හෝ එම කාර්යාල පවත්වාගෙන යාමට අවසරයකුත් මේ අවස්ථාවේදී ලබා දුන්නා.
Meanwhile, during the meeting, the head of the state also reiterated the importance of public health inspectors in guiding small and medium-scale businessmen and self-employed individuals on how to carry out their activities without any hindrance. In the meantime, with some liquor stores across the country opening up today, long queues of people were seen flocking outside the premises in complete disregard for the health and safety guidelines. However, Commissioner General of Excise M.J. Gunasiri said that no formal approval had been granted for the opening of liquor stores. However, despite this, outlets that were seen openly retailing to the mass crowds that thronged before the shops closed up once again at 6 p.m.
Health authorities announced today that Sri Lanka has so far seen 12 confirmed black fungus infected COVID-19 patients since June. Making these remarks today, consultant mycologist at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Primali Jayasekara, however, said that no COVID-19 infected children have been reported with the black fungus infection to date. However, she warned that children who are immunocompromised stand a likely chance of contracting the fungal infection along with COVID-19.
Black fungus or mucormycosis is not a very common fungal condition and is spread through the inhalation of spores in soil and vegetation. The condition targets the sinuses, the brain and lungs and can be sometimes life-threatening to immunocompromised individuals and thrives in people with weakened immune systems. Earlier in May, India reported more than 4,300 cases among COVID patients. As of today, Sri Lanka's health authorities have already confirmed 12 black fungus cases among its own COVID-19 cases. As such, consultant mycologist at the Medical Research Institute, Dr. Primali Jayasekara, listed out the factors that raise the risk of black fungus infection.
Risk factors for this COVID-associated mucormycosis: prolonged or profound neutropenia, that is the low neutrophils in your body due to some other problem, for example, chemotherapy treatment for a cancer or something like that. Diabetes mellitus, metabolic acidosis, malnutrition, and some Western drugs in the group of steroids, and bone marrow and solid organ transplant recipients, patients with hematological malignancies, that is blood cancers, and patients with burn injuries, and IV drug users.
So what are the signs and symptoms of the black fungus infection?
The presentation of these patients can be unilateral facial swelling, pain, unilateral headache, nasal or sinus congestion, fever, and there could be blood-stained nasal discharge also. The signs include black ulceration on the hard palate and two sides of the nose. Sometimes you can get protrusion of the eye and visual problems and visual loss also if the disease progresses towards your eye. And the complications include it can go up to the brain, and if not treated properly, even death can take place.
Dr. Jayasekara also emphasized that while patients infected with the fungus must seek medical advice, patients with compromised immune system should stay away from outdoor activities such as gardening and coming into contact with decaying plant matter.
Individuals with diabetes mellitus, adequate controlling of sugar levels in your blood is very important. And any individuals with diseased or decreased immune system, they should reduce source of environmental exposure like gardening and avoid old or contaminated food or things like that. And always use clean masks. Refrain from using Western medication without consulting a qualified doctor if you contact COVID-19.
Meanwhile, Dr. Jayasekara also added that so far there have been no COVID-19 infected children reported to have contracted the black fungus so far.
කුඩා ළමුන්ට නම් කළුදිනේ රෝගය ඇත්තටම වාර්තා වුනේ නැහැ කොවිඩ් රෝගීන් අතර. හැබැයි යම්කිසි කුඩා ළමයෙක් ඉන්නවා නම් මොකක් හරි හේතුවක් හින්දා නිදාන්ගත රෝගයක් මොනවා හරි හේතුවක් හින්දා ප්‍රතිශක්තිකරණ පද්ධතිය ගොඩක් දුර්වල වෙලා එහෙම කළුදිනේ රෝගය කොවිඩ් රෝගයත් එක්ක වැළඳෙන්න බැරි කමක් නැහැ. ඒ හින්දා ගොඩක් ඒ වගේ කුඩා ළමුන් මේ දේවල් වලින් පරිස්සම් කරගන්න ඕන.
In the meantime, with reports of some cardiac patients allegedly fearful of continuing their regular medication after contracting COVID-19, cardiologist at the Negombo Hospital, Dr. Disna Amaratunga, cleared out any misconceptions today.
If by any chance, if you infect with this COVID virus, then at that point also we advise you to continue your current medications, but you have to stop your usual exercises. And it is very important to keep an eye about your symptoms. And also COVID virus has the potency of infecting your heart as well as the cardiovascular system and the conducting system. And because of these things, the patients are at a vulnerable state to get cardiac illnesses due to COVID.
Health authorities announced today that the Pfizer vaccine will be administered to school children aged between 15 to 19, in addition to children over 12 years of age with congenital abnormalities and disabilities.
In order for the government to go ahead with plans to reopen schools, experts recommended vaccinations of school children to begin as well. As such, health authorities announced today that the Pfizer vaccine will be administered to children aged between 15 to 19, while children over 12 years of age with congenital abnormalities and disabilities will also be vaccinated. Meanwhile, speaking at a media briefing today, cardiologist at the Negombo Hospital, Dr. Disna Amaratunga, dispelled all misconceptions currently in circulation pertaining to cardiac patients getting vaccinated.
It is mandatory for you to take the COVID vaccination. It doesn't matter the brand or the type of the vaccination that you are getting. It is mandatory for you to get the 2 doses of this vaccination. And at the moment, any active or chronic cardiac illness is not a contraindication to take the vaccine. All the cardiac patients who are on aspirin, clopidogrel as well as ticagrelol and warfarin can go ahead with the vaccination. And if you are on warfarin, you have to check your INR before getting the vaccination. And if your INR level is less than 3, you can go ahead with the vaccination. And if you had bypass surgery, stenting as well as pacemaker implantation or any other cardiac surgery in the past, we don't consider it as a contraindication to go ahead with the vaccine.
In the meantime, Dr. Hemantha Herath said today that no guidelines have been issued by the Ministry of Health preventing people from moving about without their vaccine card.
කවුද කරලා තියෙන්නේ කියලා අපිට කිව්වොත් අපිට බලන්න පුළුවන් ඒක මොන ප්‍රමාණයක්ද කියලා තියෙන්නේ කියලා. අපි සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශයෙන් මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් එවැනි මාර්ගෝපදේශයක් නිකුත් කරලා නැහැ. කවුරු හරි තවත් නීතියක් අනුව කටයුතු කරනවා නම් ඒක අපේ බලයේ තියෙන කෙනෙක් කරලා තියෙනවා නම් අපිට කරන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. නමුත් අපි දන්නවා එවැනි දෙයකදී අපිට ඔය ඒ සිද්ධිය පිළිබඳව අපිට කොහෙද කියලා අපිට විස්තර දුන්නොත් අපි බලන්නම් එහෙම දෙයක් වෙලා තියෙනවද කියලා.
Former Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna parliamentarian Jayantha Katagoda, who in this July vacated his seat to make way for the current Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa's re-entry into Parliament, is set to take his seat once again. With the resignation of former State Minister for Money, Capital Market and State Enterprise Reforms Ajit Nivard Cabral last week, in order to take up the Central Bank Governor post, Katagoda has been named as his replacement. Following the vacation of his seat, an extraordinary gazette was published by the Election Commission today, stating that Secretary General of Parliament had informed the Commission of the vacancy. With that, the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna had submitted Katagoda's name to the Election Commission on Monday to be appointed as a National List MP representing the Colombo district. We'll return after this short commercial break. Don't go away. Welcome back in business news. The Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index has recorded a drop of 12.7%, 7 index points rather, to 41.45.1 due to the increase in COVID-19 cases during the month and the resultant travel restrictions.
According to the Central Bank's Purchasing Managers Index for the month of August, the resurgence of the COVID-19 pandemic in the month has resulted in a slowdown in manufacturing activities. Accordingly, the manufacturing PMI recorded an index value of 45.1 in August, recording a fall of 12.7 index points from the previous month, mainly driven by the decrease in new orders, production, employment and stock of purchases. A decline in new orders and production, especially in the manufacture of food and beverages, furniture and textiles, and wearing apparel sectors, contributed most to the overall decrease. According to the report, many respondents stressed that the continuous increase in the cost of imported raw materials adversely affected their profit margins. Manufacturers have cautioned that the uncertainty over the COVID-19 pandemic would continuously hinder prospects of the manufacturing sector, yet overall expectations for manufacturing activities for the next 3 months remained above the neutral threshold. Meanwhile, the services PMI also dropped to an index value of 46.2 in August due to COVID-19 related restrictions. The sub-indices that recorded declines were new businesses, business activity, employment, and expectations for activity. New businesses decreased in August compared to the previous month, mainly due to declines observed in the wholesale and retail trade, insurance, real estate, and education subsectors. Nevertheless, the transportation subsector recorded some improvement solely due to the growth in freight volumes. Moreover, the financial services subsector also indicated improvements despite disturbances from travel restrictions.
Shares clocked their second consecutive weekly loss as the CSE All Share Price Index, which logged a weekly loss of 0.71%, was down 0.52% at 8,801.95 points at the closing bell today, dragged down by losses in the consumer discretionary and industrial sectors. The S&P SL 20 index of stocks meanwhile closed down 0.67% or 18.12 points to end at 3,291.87 points. With that, here's Dimantha Matthew with the weekly stock market report.
Today we saw a lot of volatility in the index, similar throughout this week, where we saw the second consecutive day that the market declined. So previously we saw the market spiking during the early part of the week, but then yesterday and today we saw gradual declines where we saw a lot of selling pressure coming back into the market as the index closed in on the 9,000 mark. So the SPI managed to close marginally above 8,800 but saw a decline of 46 points during the day. So overall we saw a significant decline during the first hour of trading as there was an intraday low that was recorded at 8,753 points.
With that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining. Have a good night.